We're on base Amud base. We are 22 lines down from the top, parallel, almost in between where you see the Tosfos of Kaman. Go across and down a little bit, middle of the line. Hi, Paul. And we are on middle of the line. The word says Bishlama. First word on the line is Kashera. You see that? Yeah. Okay, so we'll make a start. Okay, so just to recap, last time. So again, we are still looking at the machlokas between the Tanakama Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah about a sukkah which is higher than 20 amas, whether it's kosher or not. Tanakama said it's possible, whereas Rabbi Yehuda is machshir, said it's kosher. We then saw three opinions of Rav. Yeah, we saw Rabbi Yosha. Rabbi Yosha said, we tried to work out who does the machlokas go according to. So we said Rabbi Yosha said, Rabbi Yosha's Amar Rav, the name of Rav, machlokas b'shein defanos migus l'schach. Rabbi Yosha told us that the machlokas between the Tanakama in the Mishnah and Rabbi Yehuda is when you've got a sukkah where the walls don't reach the schach. Yeah. However, if the walls reach the schach, even the Tanakama would agree that 20 amas or more is absolutely fine. The Gemara asked, who does that go according to? Is it Rabbi Zera, or Rava? Says the Gemara, we said it's like Rabba, because Rabba said, what was Rabba's issue with a sukkah that is 20 amas high? Person's eyes don't look that far up. Now we say, that's only if the walls don't reach the schach, because there's a gap between where the walls are and the schach. However, if the walls reach the schach, we said that even 20 amas high, a person's eyes will follow the line of the wall, and then they'll see the schach, and therefore we're good. So that's Rabbi Yosha. Then we said, Rav Huna. Rav Huna said the name of Rav. The machlokus is b'shein ba'ela abam amos ala abba amos. The machlokus in the Mishnah, according to Rav Huna, is where the sukkah is only daled amos by daled amos. It's about 6 foot by 6 foot, or between 6 and 8 foot by 8 foot. Right. In that case, Tanakama says it's possible if it's that high, whereas Rabbi Yehuda will say it's okay. What's the source of the machlokas? Who does that like? In terms of explaining our Mishnah, it's like Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera said, "Amar mishum selhu," because we need there to be the shade from the schach, and a sukkah which is less than daled amos by daled amos, but that tall, the geometry of it, I think that's the right thing. Yeah, the geometry of it is that it will be the walls giving you the shade and not the schach. However, even the Tanakama would agree that it's as long as it's daled amos by daled amos, even 20 amos high, it's okay, because once you've got that ratio between walls and height, it's between width and height, you're okay. And then the final suggestion is that of Rabbi Chanan bar Rabba, who said, I'm going to say the name of Rav, machlokas k'she'einu mechazekas ela kedei rosho rubo v'shulchanoi. They would say that machlokas between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda is where you got a sukkah which is only big enough to fit in a person's head, majority of their body, and their table lying down, person lying down. Yeah, and that we said is a sukkah which is smaller than that, which is actually 7 tefachim square, so really quite small. Yeah, talking about a tefach is about, what do we say, about 8 centimeters, so about 35 centimeters square. It's not very big at all, right? No. Yeah, so that's very, very small. So machlokas is, if it's that small, the Tanakama will say we're possible, but when it's that high, we say possible, whereas Rabbi Yehuda say machshir. Now, what would be the reason between that machlokas between the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda? Why would Rabbi Yehuda say it's okay? Why would the Tanakama say it's possible in that instance? Would we say, like Rabbi says, because people don't look upwards? That's irrelevant with relation to that size. Would we say because of the shade, or we've said even with Daled Amos, it's going to be no good? So the Gemara answers, who's it go like? Lo kechad, it doesn't go like any of them. Yeah, we said the only reason, if you look at, remember the Tosfos command on the right hand side, middle of the page on the right hand side, we said the command lo chad. Who does Rabbi Chanan bar Abba's opinion go like? We said none of them, not Rabba, not Rabbi Zera, and not Rava. We said not any of them. Rabbi bar Chanan bar Abba tzricha tam of yesh mefarshim mishum ta'abelei lul shel tanagolim. Rabbi Chanan bar Abba's reason that a sukkah which is less than that can only fit a person's head and majority of their body and their table in is because the reason why it's possible, according to Tanakama, is because it looks like a chicken coop. Yeah, and a chicken coop is not a sukkah. Yeah, no one sits in the chicken coop. Yeah, as long as it's a tiny bit bigger than that, then it's no longer considered to be a chicken coop. Now has the name of a sukkah to it, and therefore even the Tanakama would say it's kosher. Okay, that makes sense. So we've got those three different opinions as to the opinion of Rav, as to the machlokas in the Mishnah. According to Rav Yosha, it's when the walls don't meet the schach. Rav Huna talking about when it's less than Arba Amos, and Rav Chanan is when it's less than seven tfachim. Okay, with that in mind, the Gemara continues. So we've got those three different opinions. Says the Gemara, Bishlama. Everyone got it, yeah? Says the Gemara, Bishlama de Rabbi Yosha, Pliga de Rabbi Huna, Rav Chanan bar Rabba. It makes sense that Rabbi Yosha disagrees with Rav Huna and Rav Chanan because the Inhu Kayav Shiura, Zamoshcha, because they provide shiurim, they provide dimensions of the length of the sukkah. Rav Huna says it has to be Dalet Amos, whereas Rav Chanan says it has to be 7 tefachim, or has to be enough for your head and your majority of your body and your table. Whereas V'ihu lo kayahiv shiura b'machsha. Whereas Rabbi Yosha doesn't give a dimension, he just says that the walls have to reach the schach. So it's a different issue. He would say that machlokas is based on, do the walls reach the schach? If they do, great, even if it's over Dalet Amos. If they do, it's not Dalet Amos, 20 Amos. If they don't, no good, according to Tanakama. Whereas the others would say, no, it's not about whether the walls reach the schach or not. It's about the internal dimensions of the sukkah. So we can understand why Rav Yosha disagrees with Rav Huna and Rav Chanan bar Rabba. However, Ela Rav Huna v'Rav Chanan bar Rabba nema behechsha sukkah kamiflegei. We can just say that Rav Huna and Rav Chanan bar Rabba disagree about the appropriate proportions of a sukkah, which they clearly do. Let's just say that it's machlokas about size. Demar Sava Heksha Sukkah Ba'arba Amos, where Rav Huna holds that an appropriate size of the sukkah is Dalet Amos, 4 Amos. Umar Sava Heksha Sukkah Mechazekes Rosha V'Rubish. And whereas Rav Chanan would say no, the correct size, the appropriate size, is a minimum of being able to accommodate a person's head, majority of their body, and their table. Why not just say that? Why say, according to Rav, this is the machlokus? Just say that both Rav Huna and Rav Chanan bar Rabba tell us that the machlokus in the Mishnah is about the size of the sukkah, either Dalet Amos or 7 tefachim. So answers the Gemara, loy. No, that's not the case. Let's just hold on. Let's just see if there's Rashi. Yeah, look at the Rashi on the left-hand side, Lamoshcha, to parallel with pretty much where we're up to, just slightly higher. Lamoshcha, according to its dimensions. The size of the dimensions of the sukkah. Ta'ama ben gedola ben katzana. Whether you say it has to be large, whether it's small. The only difference is about whether, according to Rabbi Yoshia, he's not interested about whether it's big or small, 4 amas or 7 tefachim. He only cares about whether the walls reach the schach. Ela Rav Huna v'Rav Chanan, says Rashi. However, whereas Rav Huna and Rav Chanan, to Amri Taima d'Rabbanan b'Shiura d'Mokshahu, they both say that the issue is about the size of the sukkah. Just obviously they disagree what that size is. Uma Ama Dalet Amos, Uma Ama Rosh Ruba b'Shulchano. One says Dalet Amos, the other one says head, majority of the body. Name a Beheksha Sukkah. Let's say that they are discussing the size of the sukkah. They disagree about the width and the length of the sukkah. But that's exactly what they're both arguing about. Whereas the Rabbanan are saying with a very small semes, some say which means like a very like a shrunk down size, the size of its the dimensions of the sukkah. Okay, we don't have to carry on. There's a long Rashi. We don't have to carry on with Rashi. Let's go back in the Gemara. So we said, is that the source of the argument? So sorry, Gemara says, no. Why? Because the truth is, everybody agrees, as we'll see later on in Gimel Amud Aleph, that we paskin that the minimum size for a sukkah is that your head, majority of your body, and your table can fit in it. Yeah, laying down. Yes, true. If you look at Gimel Amud Aleph, you've got that in front of you. Just move across to Gimel Amud Aleph. You'll have to keep getting the page and turn over. Yeah. Gimel Amud Aleph, you'll see middle of the page. You'll see there's an asterisk in the middle of the page. Misha Haya Rosh Ruba Sukkah Shulchana B'Toch. Abbas, no, that's not there. Sorry, no, it's further up. Yeah, it's further up. Sorry, it's 2, 4, 6, about 10 lines down in the Gemara. 2 words in, you'll see there's a hanging aleph, the word halacha. Line starts Bar Yitzchak, halacha. Okay. Yeah. You don't have it yet. Page. Halacha sricha shtemu chazeches rosho v'ruba v'shulchanoi. Amar of Shmuel by Yitzchak. Shmuel says halacha is you need to have that it can at least accommodate your head, majority of your body, and your table lying down. Yeah. So everyone agrees that. Everyone, the Tanna Kama, Rabbi Yehuda would agree that the dimensions are not an issue. We all agree on that. So go back to what do we say? And what is it that they're arguing about? The machlokas between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yehuda is this: that according to one, that if the sukkah can accommodate your head, most of your body, and your table, aval peligi, aval yote me rosha v'ruba b'shulchano, divra kol keshera. Everyone agrees that it's kosher, even if it's higher than 20 amas. As long as it has those minimum internal dimensions of being able to accommodate 7 tefachim, to accommodate your head, majority of your body, and your table, it's kosher, even if it goes higher than 20 amas. Umasava me rosha v'ruba b'shulchano ad daled amas pligi. Whereas Rabbi Chanan would say they're arguing about from the minimum of being able to accommodate head, majority of body, and your table, up to Daled Amos, they argue. Aval Yote Medaled Amos Divrei HaKol Keshera. But once you get to more than Daled Amos, everybody agrees that a sukkah, even if it's 20 Amos high, is kosher. If you look, so Rav Huna would say, he said, what is the machlokas? Daled Amos, right? Not that, and what we're now saying is not that he means that the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yehuda disagree if it's Daled Amos or not, because he said everyone would agree to that. What he means by this, what he actually means by this is from 7 tefachim, meaning a sukkah that's small, that can accommodate, but can accommodate your head, majority of your body, and your table, up to the point where it's Daled Amos. That's what they disagree about. The Tanna Kama would say posel if it's 20 Amos high. Rabbi Yehuda would say kosher. But once you get to Daled Amos, everyone would agree, even the Tanna Kama would agree that it's kosher, even if it's over 20 Amos, because that's the minimum dimensions. Okay, whereas with Rav Hanan bar Rabba, he would say that once you've got it to minimum dimensions of 7 tefachim, head, majority of body, and a table, then everyone would agree that it's kosher, even if it goes above 20 amos. But any less than that, that's where you have a machlokas. But Yehuda would say less than that still be kosher, whereas the Tanakh would say less than that still no good. Okay. In fact, what we paskin is that is the case. We're actually paskin that as long as the sukkah is contains the majority, the head, the majority of body, and your table is kosher. Most lenient. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, back in the Gemara. Sorry, let's just look at Rashi. On the left-hand side, it's quite a way down now. About 14 lines up in the Rashi. At the end of the line, you'll see the words Aval Yoter. Aval Yoter mikadei rosho v'chulei kashira. Kashera. The reason why above that, if it doesn't have at least enough space to accommodate your head, majority of body, and your table in it, and it's more than 20 amos, it's possible. We don't know the reason why that. We're not being given that reason. Could be like we said with Tosfos said that in that situation, it's a very narrow, very long thing. They maybe say that's a chicken coop on its side, but we don't actually know the reason. As we said earlier, that it doesn't go according to any of these. It doesn't go according to Rabbi Zera, nor does it go according to Rabba, nor does it go according to Rabba. Okay, is that clear? Does that make sense? Okay, great. Okay, see if there's more here. Yeah, okay. Okay, Meisvei says the Gemara. Meisvei. You got that? Yep. Okay. Meisvei says the Gemara. The Gemara now raises a challenge on Rav Huna and Rav Hanan bar Rabba, who are suggesting that Rabbi Yehuda would be machshir a sukkah under all these circumstances, and it's the Rabbi Yehuda says that a sukkah higher than 20 amos is kosher. Says the Gemara, sukkah she gavola mala me'esrim amma pasula. Like our Mishnah, there's a brayso that says that a sukkah which is higher than 20 amos is possible. Rabbi Yehuda machshir, whereas Rabbi Yehuda would say it's kosher. Ada arba'im v'chamishim amma, whether it is even 40 or 50 amos. Says it would appear that Rabbi Yehuda is saying we don't care how tall it is, doesn't matter. Yeah, we're not interested. Yeah. So there's a brayso. Says the Gemara, I'm Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda say, I'll prove it to you. Ma'aseh behelene hamalka belud. There was an incident once with the Queen Helena. Queen Helena in Lud. Queen Helena was a queen who converted somewhere in Assyria, which obviously she lived in Lud at the time. I'm not sure that's necessarily where it's Lod, isn't it, where the airport is? Yeah, I'm not sure that's necessarily where they were talking about was then, but maybe it would have been. She was this queen who converted together with her sons. She had a sukkah that was higher than and during sukkahs, the elders of the community used to go and visit her. Used to go visit the royalty. They used to go in and out of her sukkah. And they didn't say anything to her. They didn't say to her, excuse me, Your Highness, I'm afraid your sukkah isn't kosher because it's 20 amos high. So what can we learn from this? What would Rabbi Yehuda say? Here's proof. Queen Helena had this sukkah, a very tall sukkah, which the Zakanim at the time used to go and visit, and they never said anything, which clearly meant they accepted it was a kosher sukkah. Says the Gemara. So they said to him, they said to Rabbi Yehuda, Misham Raya is from here. You're really going to take a proof from here? Is this really where you're going to learn that a sukkah more than 20 amos is kosher? Isha Hayasa, she's a woman who potra min sukkah, which means she's exempt from sukkah. Mitzvah Saisei Shasman grammar. It's a positive mitzvah bound by time. Woman is exempt. It has to be done on the 15th of Tishri. Therefore, she's exempt. Therefore, she can sit in anything she likes. Yeah. She even sits in her house. She has no chiyuv. Of course, I didn't say anything to her. So we can't bring a proof from there because there's no way of knowing that they accepted it was a kosher sukkah because she didn't need to be in a kosher sukkah.
People visit you. Would they be allowed?
Yeah, you go out for the day. You don't have to, as long as you're not eating, you don't have to sit in a sukkah.
So you can still.
Well, we say living. We say Chaburah. Yeah, we define dwelling as
But it's okay, but some people will be happy to go to somebody else's house and sit in their house in the sukkah.
Yeah. There's nothing to stop you.
They won't eat me, but they're quite happy to go and sit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
yeah,
right. So, right. Although we say Chaburah in Kudura, you have to dwell in it as you would in your normal home.
Yeah.
And how do we find that? The main part of dwelling in a home is eating your meals in your home, right? Okay. Therefore, you have to eat your meals in the sukkah. Yes, okay, you're meant to. There is a mitzvah to spend time in the sukkah as well. Yeah. When we're learning Torah. Yeah. No. If you go out for the day, you go out for the day.
What about the children?
So hold on a second. Here you could also argue there's a mitzvah of going to visit the queen, right? So therefore, since they may actually be exempt from the mitzvah of sukkah, because you have a principle of osek mitzvah potam mitzvah. When you're involved in another mitzvah, for example, there is brought down in the Gemara later on that those who go and travel, going to visit their Rebbe on sukkahs are exempt from sukkah because they're traveling to do a mitzvah. Yeah, in the days when it was a mitzvah going to visit a Rebbe, right? So here they may be exempt because they're fulfilling a mitzvah of Kavod HaMalka. They're giving honor to the queen. Yeah.
Is there a hierarchy on what mitzvah does another mitzvah?
No, we say if you're involved in one mitzvah and it precludes you from doing another mitzvah. For example, you're learning Torah and someone comes to the door to get stucker. Al pi halacha, you're exempt because I'm osek with mitzvah. I'm possible from a possible mitzvah. Yes. Yeah. You can't say, well, I'm involved in one mitzvah and therefore I can do an aveira. No, that you can't say. That'd be nice. Yeah. You can't murder someone while you're learning Torah.
But that's only if it makes it impossible to do the other mitzvah. So if they could have adjusted the sukkah to achieve both, they could have done both.
100%. Yeah. There's no way of doing the two at the same time, then you're possible in the other one. If you could do them simultaneously, then they're not possible.
In Stanford too, when you're doubling with yours, and they're coming over and going, Sadaka, especially when it comes to Shabbat.
Yeah.
You've got your hand when they go there.
Right.
I got one son. I got very angry.
We've all got that.
I knocked his head and all his money went to the world.
How was that for your kavanah?
The rabbi told me I should have helped myself, but he understood why I did it.
Right.
I wasn't about to die.
Yeah, true. It can be distracting. A lot of things that go on in shuls can be distracting. I always say that before complaining about other people distracting you, if our kavanah was up to a level where we were truly had kavanah, we would be distracted by a lot of things. Yeah. But they're challenged. So similarly, if you can do another mitzvah while you're involved in them, you could do, and if you're involved in a mitzvah, you can still do another one, and that's absolutely fine. But if it's impossible,
I'll tell you exactly. Money on the
side. Yeah.
Put it on the side. Yeah. In numbers, and I just go.
Right. Yeah. In Eretz, so you see that a lot. People in shuls, they have on the stender, they have like a shekel on the stender, like shekalim lined up, and then they come along and they just give them one. So it's just it doesn't distract you.
In this case, also, Rabbi, would it be a case that the rabbis couldn't say anything to the queen not to embarrass her? If it was like Yom Tov, they couldn't adjust the sukkah anyway.
Possibly. Yeah, it could be pikuach nefesh, possibly. Yeah, I'm not sure she had. I'm not sure she had.
Just to embarrass someone in public when you say you've not done something properly and you can't remedy it at the time, possibly, because if it was Yom Tov, they couldn't have adjusted it anyway.
Yeah, it is a consideration. Or no one mentions it here. No one suggests that's the reason why they didn't say anything. Yeah, Rabbi Yehuda is trying to infer from this the fact that they didn't say anything is proof that a sukkah which is over 20 amos is kosher. Yeah, they will come back and say, hold on a second. No, she's a woman, she's exempt from sukkah, therefore she can sit in wherever she likes. That's why they didn't say anything. So this, yeah.
I once had a situation for sure because I got the list of all the addresses sent to me as I was a gabbai of the Muslim Union. And when it came to Zifra Malachim, I sent them all out, but unfortunately they weren't BC, they were CC. I got all these emails back, and I got sure at the time. Someone in the shul phoned me and said to me, Jeremy, you've caused the shul a lot of grief and everything like this. I think you should donate a kiddush to the shul. I said to him, well, that's funny the thing, you did one in the shul last week. Rabbi Naftali gave a shir about gaining profits on other people's mirrors. He was talking about Exxon Valdez at the time. So I said, firstly, I didn't do it for my own self, I was doing it for charity. Second of all, you're embarrassing. So I said to him, do you want, and by embarrassing me, you're making my blood go into my face, which is a kid's death. Right. I said, do you want me dead? Right. They said no. I said, fine. And that's the end of the conversation then.
Right. Very good. Yeah, so we could argue maybe we want to embarrass her, but you know what? But if someone is doing something which is not up in halacha, then you have sort of an obligation to tell them. Obviously, you do it in a way which doesn't embarrass them, but I think we can infer from that they didn't say anything, even privately. Rabbi Yehuda will say that shows that it was kosher. They had no issue with it.
But as I said before, this sukkah wasn't just made for her, it was made for a family.
Right.
So a family would have had, I'm sure she had some.
That's tomorrow's going to come on to.
I suppose it puts a different gloss on the word Your Highness if it's over 20 amas high.
I like that, Paul. Very good. Very good. I like it. Very good.
Since when lack of any evidence proves something?
Yeah,
it's a good point. But it's not lack of evidence. The fact that I think what he said, reviewer is saying is, if there had been an issue, they would have said something. The fact that they didn't say something is proof that there was no issue. It's not lack of evidence. It's saying
would
the
they
evidence.
have gone and measured something to check they wasn't 20 amma?
No, it's clearly 20. It was clearly higher than 20 ammas. Yeah, there's no question that it wasn't. Okay, it was clearly a very tall sukkah, but they didn't say anything, and from that Rabbi Yehuda is going to suggest is evidence enough that they were satisfied that it was kosher. Okay, we are going to reject it. Says the Gemara. So first we're going to say she's potter from it, of course. Therefore, that's why they didn't say anything. They didn't need to say anything. However, they say Amar lehen. So he said to them, "V'haloi shiva banim havela." But suddenly she had 7 sons. V'oid chomase lo asa ela al pi chachamim. And not only that, but also everything she did according to the word of the Chachamim. She would do everything the rabbis told her to do. So that proves, if they had not been happy, they would have told her. If they had seen something she was doing was wrong, they would have told her in a way that doesn't embarrass her. But she would have accepted what they said. And therefore, we can infer from that, since she does everything that the rabbis tell her, we can infer from that this must have been correct. It must have been the right sukkah. So what does it mean? She had 7 sons, and further, everything she did. Why? Well, the Gemara is giving 2 reasons. She had 7 sons, meaning one of those sons must have been of an age where he would have to have fulfilled the mitzvah. He was old enough that he had to do it in a kosher sukkah. Therefore, she had to be in a kosher sukkah.
What if you had? What if she had 1 son every year? So, like the oldest one was 7 or 8.
Yeah. So we're going to come to that in a second. We'll come to that in a second, exactly how old they were. But for the moment, the question the Gemara is going to ask now is, it's given 2 reasons. He rebuts the suggestion that the sukkah was only for her and therefore didn't need to be kosher because she's a woman and she's potter. Well, says, hold on, she's got sons. Therefore, and one of those sons must have been at an age where he needed the kosher sukkah, and therefore it must be a kosher sukkah. And more than that, and also in addition to that, everything she did was according to what the rabbis told her. So says the Gemara, Lama li lamatni v'oid kol ha'ma'aseh lo asta el al pi ha'chachamim. Why did you need to tell me? Once you told me she must have a child who's old enough to need a kosher sukkah, why do you need to say, oh, and also in addition to that, everything she does is in accordance with the chachamim? You don't need it. It's unnecessary. Once you told me she's got a son old enough, that shows that she has to have had a kosher sukkah. The fact they didn't say anything must have mean they accepted it was a kosher sukkah, and therefore it proves, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that a sukkah higher than 20 amos is kosher. So answers the Gemara, Hachi Kamalu. This is what you can say to you. Ki tomru banim katanim hayu, ukatanim paturim in sukkah. If you're going to say that her children were young, and children are exempt from the sukkah, given to Shiva Hayu, since she had 7, it would be impossible that out of those 7, there wouldn't be at least one who no longer needs his mother. What does that mean? Look at Rashi. What does it mean he no longer needs his mother? It's Rashi on the left-hand side, 5 lines up. We see later on in the Chavches Amud Aleph, a child who no longer needs his mother, meaning the child is old enough to be separated from his mother. He can manage on he's not always holding on to his mother's coattails. He's old enough of an age where he can fend for himself a little bit. There's now an obligation to teach him in the mitzvah sukkah. Tomorrow will derive later on in Chavches Amud Aleph. Says the Ritva on this. Yeah, I'm Rabbi Yehuda Ma'aseh Be'Hei. Meha Shamina the Katan Shanach Yinichon Oso B'Mitzvahs Lasos Mitzvah Be'Heksher Gamo K'Gadol. We can infer from this that when the child reaches an age of chinuch, of education, meaning they're old enough to understand certain things, you have to educate them. When it comes to the mitzvah sukkah, you have to do it in the correct way, completely right. Meaning you don't teach a child, you don't build a sukkah, under their bed and say, sukkah's for you now, go onto your bed and that's your sukkah. That doesn't teach them anything. That's just a game, right? Yeah. Once they reach an age where they understand the significance of sukkah, the way you teach them about the mitzvah is that they go into a kosher sukkah. Yeah. And that's what we can derive from this brayso in relation to the sukkah of Helena. There had to be at least one of her 7 children who've reached this age where they're ready to be educated about the mitzvah sukkah, and therefore would require a kosher sukkah. Umikra, and we derive this and we can learn it from a posuk as well. Posuk in Mishlei, educate a child according to their way. Meaning, when the child reaches an age where they can understand, they've got enough understanding, then you teach them something which is appropriate to that. So if they can understand the concept of sukkah, then you teach them by letting them go into a kosher sukkah. Says the notes here. Quotes Rashi in Gemara and Kedushin says, when the child is young, you educate them in the correct way that they will follow for the rest of their lives. You don't teach a child, so let's take lulav. You don't teach a child and give them a child who's old enough to understand the mitzvahs of lulav. And you say, here's the lulav, right? What you want to do is you do the hokey cokey with it, in out, shake it all around, right? Very nice, but if you see someone who's an adult in shul doing that, you realize the parents didn't know how to educate them properly, right? But once they reach an age where you can tell them right, forward and right over there, you tell them the right way. You don't educate a child wrongly. You don't say, when they understand the correct way to cross the road, you don't say to them, well, close your eyes and run out into the middle of the road. Well, what parent? That's not chinuch, right? I don't know what that's called. That's definitely not chinuch, right? So similarly here, the fact that one of her children must have reached the age where, and we can say roughly about 5 or 6, it doesn't have to be, we're not talking about the Bach Yuva yet, they're not obligated to keep the mitzvah themselves, but the parents are obligated to educate them. to even, let's say, the age of 5 or 6, maybe, again, depending on the child's capacity. Therefore, there would need to be a kosher sukkah. Therefore, here, since it was impossible that her children wouldn't have been at that age, any of them wouldn't have been at that age, she said she got 7 children. Hello?
What if she had triplets?
Oh, right. I was just about to answer your question, your previous question, which was, if she's got 7 children and she's having one every 9 months, at least one of them's got to be nearly 7.
Yeah, but
you could have sextuplets. She could have had 6 or 7 at once.
Yes, quite possibly.
But I would argue that in those days you wouldn't have had 7 children and all survived.
Right. Yeah, especially if there were multiple births. Yeah, very unlikely. Okay, not impossible, but very unlikely. Okay. Gemara goes on and says, we are 6 lines up from the bottom, one word in. And even if you to say, oh, hold on a second, a child who's reached the age of education, that chiyuv to educate them in a kosher sukkah is only derabanan. It's not at the level of Torah law, but only the rabbinic law. The rabbi said that a child who's reached that age should educate them. You're obligated to educate them. That's a rabbinic ruling, not a Torah ruling. The ihi b'derabanan law mishkacha, and she, Queen Helena, didn't follow rabbinic law. She followed Torah law, but not rabbinic law. Tashema. That's why the Gemara had to give a second answer and say, that's why the Mishnah said, that's why the Bryce has said that not only once telling us that she had 7 children, and therefore one of them must at least have been an age where she needs to obligate them in a kosher sukkah. And even if you say, well, that was only Durabanan, says the Gemara. But also you need to know in addition that she always did everything according to what the Chachamim said. So even Durabanan, she followed even the Durabanans. Yeah. So even though the requirement to educate her child is only Durabanan, she would have done that as well. And therefore, the sukkah must be kosher. Which proves that when Rabbi Yehuda says that a sukkah which is higher than 20 amos is kosher, there's proof. Here's proof. Okay. Okay, 3 lines up from the bottom of the Gemara, says the Gemara.
Could it be because it's a very wide sukkah that it could take a height of over 20 amos? There's a hotel in Israel that uses the inside courtyard, and okay, it's less than 20 amos there, but if it was a palace courtyard, then she's got the walls of the palace. It could support, or you could see a sukkah that's more than 20 amos high. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Here we're not actually trying to give the reasons for it. Rabbi Yehuda is saying that again, we've had the discussions about what is the machlokas. Is it when the walls reach the schach or not? Is it if it's a daled amos by daled amos, or is it 7 tevakim square? Any of those. We would say as long as we have any one of those according to those different opinions, then the 20 amos is fine. Yeah. So says the Gemara, Bishlama, 3 lines up from the bottom. Bishlama manda ama b'shein defanos migayis l'schach machlokas. Now this makes sense if we say that it makes sense according to one who says that the machlokas is when the walls don't reach. The schach is the machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and Tana Kama. Who was that? That was Rabbah. Yes, that was Rabbah. Remember, Laman Yedu. Yeah, he would say you need to know that you're in a sukkah. The only way you know is when your eyes can see the schach. More than 20 amos up, her eyes don't go. But that we said is only when, says Rabbi Yosha, that's only when the walls don't reach the schach. But he would say that's like rubber, right? But everybody agree that if the walls reach the schach, then it's kosher. So that makes sense in this case here. However, Darka says more. Darka shall malka liyeshev b'sukkah she'en defanos megias the schach. However, that can't be because we can't say that the walls reach the schach, because the way of royalty is they sit in a sukkah where dafka the walls don't reach the schach. Why? Mishum avira, because of the air circulation. And we're on Gimel Omid Aleph. Have you got? I've only got one copy. Yeah, I've only got one copy. So I'll print you another copy. Okay. Top of Gimel Omid Aleph Mishum Avira, because of the air. So the way of royalty is they sit in a ventilated sukkah, which dafka doesn't. The walls don't reach the schach. Says Rashi on top right hand corner. Mishum Avira Ruach Shehi Sholet Ba Mipnei Achom. There was a gap at the top in order that the air could circulate because of the heat. So the heat would be able to escape, but it wasn't a stuffy sukkah, right? So yeah.
But is that a all year round when it's hot approach? Rather than, to say that royalty do that, presumably they wouldn't choose to have a sukkah that's different 7 days. Presumably you're talking about under normal circumstances through the summer, they could be sitting outside in the shade.
It could be, but we're saying this even if they were to build themselves a sukkah. I think what we're saying is that these summer houses that the royalty have a gap between the roof, the walls, and the roof in order you've got the air circulation, air conditioning.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So therefore, Helena's sukkah must have been built in that way, that it had that gap.
So it would have been built not just for.
I don't know whether.
But it would have been.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know whether this structure she's got is for definitely for sukkahs.
Okay.
Or it's for it has to be her summer home. Okay. We don't know. But she was clearly using it on sukkahs, and she was in it on sukkahs. Okay. So so that makes sense to say the machlokas is in a situation where the walls don't reach the schach, because the way of royalty is they sit in these types of structures where the walls don't reach the schach. Elamanda ama besukkah katana machlokas. However, according to the one who says that the machlokas is about a small sukkah, meaning either Rav Huna or Rav Chanan bar Rabba, either we're talking about a sukkah which is less than Dalet Amos, or one where you can only just about fit in your head, the majority of your body, or your and your table. You're saying that's the machlokas. Look at Rashi. End of the first line. If you're talking about the argument is about a small sukkah, but with a larger sukkah, anything more than 4 amos or bigger than 7 tefachim, even the Tanakama, the rabbis in the Mishnah would agree that it's kosher. But if you're going to say that's the machlokas, says the Gemara, that can't be, because is it really the way of royalty to sit in a small sukkah? Look at Rashi, end of the second line. A queen doesn't sit in a sukkah on her own. she has her courtiers, she has her maidens, and she has her servants reclining with her. So you're going to need a sukkah it's going to be of a substantial size to accommodate all of them. So you can't suggest that the machlokas is whether it's Talit Amos or 7 Tefachim, because that wouldn't apply to a queen. It's clearly not going to be that sort of size. So says the Gemara, beginning of the third line. So Amar Rabba Barav Ada Lo Nitzrucha Ela LeSukkah Asur Kitonios. Rather, our brisa that tells us about Queen Helena is only necessary in order to teach us about something very specific. To teach us about a sukkah which is made with several cubicles inside it. So it's a certain size, but inside it's divided up into smaller sections. And those are small sections. That's what it's coming to tell us. Says Gemara, but again, is it really the way of a queen to sit in a sukkah which has these very small cubicles in it? So Amar of Ashi lo nitzucha ella lekitaniyos sheba. So this is not talking about a small sukkah which has been divided up into cubicles, which is not the way of queen to be in. It's too small for her. No, we're talking about a large sukkah which happens to have a cubicle in it, or some cubicles in it. Look at Rashi, third of the wide lines of Rashi. Sheba. We're talking about a sukkah that has cubicles in it. Sukkah Gedola. It's a large sukkah. Libnei misibasa. For the people to sit, or for children to spend time in. And there were smaller cubicles in it for modesty. Yasva, and she would sit in one of these cubicles. So she wouldn't be sitting in the wide open part of a sukkah where everybody is. She would be sitting in like a private booth, shall we say, within the sukkah. Yeah, a private.
So it's not a sukkah within a sukkah.
No, it's just like a cubicle within the sukkah.
Because when I went away for the sukkahs, we had a very, very wealthy Russian oligarch, and he had he built a sukkah within our sukkah.
Okay.
Inside it, so his family could be their own sukkah.
Oh, wow. And what were they using the schach? They had their own schach, or they used the schach of the other sukkah?
No, they had their own schach on top of the sukkah. And then
the schach of the other sukkah was on top of it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
We'll see. It's one of the cases in the Mishnah. A sukkah built on top of another sukkah, or underneath another sukkah. It's possible. Okay, very nice. So back in the Rashi. Because in Yod Katana Betoicha, listen, we said that. She was sitting in it. V'afal gavs basula lo ikpadlan to isha b'torim in a sukkah. And even though this booth therefore is possible, so maybe it had some sort of covering over the top of it, it was like this. Sounds like it had its own scarf on it, had its own covering on it. Even though that would make it possible, or it's possible because it's too small. It's like it's an individual, like one of those the changing cubicles, right, where you can't bang your elbows against them. Yeah. So it's so small that it's possible in itself, even though it's in the larger kosher sukkah. We're not worried. They weren't worried. Why? Because she's a woman and she's possible in sukkah. So the main sukkah was kosher. Her sukkah was possible, but we don't care. And carry on. So back in the Gemara. Amar of Ashilo nitzrucha ela liktanios sheba Rabbanan Savri baneha b'sukkah me'alya haviyasvei, and the rabbis of the opinion that her sons sat in a proper sukkah v'i yasa b'kitanios mishum sniosa, whereas she would sit in one of these cubicles on account of modesty. Umishum hachi lo amri la davar, and because of that, the rabbis didn't say anything. So where are we back to now? Have we proved that Rabbi Yehuda who says that a sukkah which is 20 amos is kosher? Not yet, no. According to that, no. Because, well, hold on, no, yes or no? Anybody? Let's have a think.
Well, if it's the kids, then it the kids are being taught first how to the right what sukkah's dimension should be.
Yeah.
And the use of being having sitting in because they're when they are going to be Yotzi of the mitzvahs. So I would say the sukkah should be kosher.
Right. And what height?
Well, under the basis of what you're saying here, that it can be over 20 amos, because if it wasn't, then they would not be Yotzi, they would not be fulfilling the mitzvah of being taught how to sit in a kosher sukkah.
Right. But can we prove from this what Rabbi Huda is saying, that there's a sukkah which is more than 20 amos high is kosher? Can we prove it from this so far?
I couldn't.
We can't. I don't think we can because they've not said anything. Why? Because she's sitting in the private cubicle, which is definitely not kosher. They've not said anything. Why? Because it doesn't matter, because she's a woman and she's potter. But one second. But that doesn't prove that a sukkah with 20 amos high, which is what this was, would be kosher. Because they've not commented on that. They're just not commented because she's a woman sitting in a cubicle.
Isn't it a parent's responsibility to teach their children? So surely she should be setting an example for her sons.
Yes, but she doesn't have an obligation herself to sit in a kosher sukkah. But what she's doing is she's making sure that her children, who need to be taught the correct way of doing it, are in a kosher sukkah.
It also goes back.
No, but surely it's not teaching them the correct way, because she's not doing it correctly, and they might think, oh, if she's doing it, we can do that as well.
Have you ever heard the phrase, do as I say, don't do as I do?
Yeah,
Some of that?
Yes, but that's being
You have heard it.
and people are unlikely to listen to you after that.
Correct.
Yeah, but you've also said prior that she followed whatever her elders told her to do.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, she would not be teaching a child to sit in a non-kosher sukkah.
Yeah.
Because you know that they were coming and say, "Hold on,
it's not kosher.
You've been telling us. We understand that you're doing it for specific reasons to be in your little booth."
Mm.
But you also told me that you've told us you wanted us to ensure that everything you're doing is up here halacha, and you're sitting in a sukkah. You're teaching your kids to sit in a sukkah that's more than 20 amos high.
Yeah. So I think we can come back to the fact that she can teach her children. Look, I don't have Gabriel, according to your question, let's say she has an obligation to teach her sons to put on tefillin. Are you saying that she has to put on tefillin herself?
No, but it would definitely help them to understand it if they could see someone doing it.
Right, but if they understand that the reason why our mother is not putting on tefillin is because she doesn't have an obligation to put on tefillin. Similarly, our mother is not sitting in the kosher sukkah because she has no obligation to sit in the kosher sukkah, but she's training us to do things properly, and therefore she's making sure we put on our tefillin correctly, and she's making sure we sit in a kosher sukkah, even though she doesn't need to herself. Therefore, that's why she's not doing it herself. They'll understand that she's educating them for what they need to know. She's not saying learn from me. She's telling them this is the correct way to do it. I don't need to because I'm a woman. That's also a chinuch.
Is a woman obligated to teach her children anyway? Isn't that a malokus about mitzvahs?
Yes, it's Gemara and Kedushin. Yeah, it's Gemara and Kedushin. Because she doesn't have an obligation to be taught Torah. She has an obligation to teach her children Torah. True.
How are you supposed to teach the children Torah if you don't know Torah?
Well, that's another question. But you if you don't know, you have to teach them yourself. That's how we have schools.
But then, how is a woman supposed to teach Torah if she doesn't have an obligation to learn it?
We're not saying she has an obligation to teach Torah. We have she has. One second. We have to make a distinction here. The distinction here is not teaching Torah; it's educating children. It's different. To me, it says be mechanech l'na'al pitako. To me, mechanech. What the Ritva says, the lotion of to mehanechina also the mitzvahs. Lasos lo mitzvah beheksha gamo gadol. She's obligated to educate her children to do mitzvahs and do them in the correct way as they would be doing when they're an adult. Yeah, it's an obligation to educate, to show the right way, not necessarily to do it the right way yourself. It's a difference, a subtle difference. Look, ideally, you educate by example, but when you don't have the obligation yourself, then you obviously can't do it by example. She can't say to them, "Oh, look, do what I do, sit in the kosher sukkah." She has no obligation to sit in the kosher sukkah, but she can make sure that her sons sit in the kosher sukkah, even though she's not. She can make sure that her sons put on tefillin correctly by either getting a man to show them how to do it, or another way, without having to put them on herself. That's also chinuch. Yeah, it's not limited Torah. It's not teaching Torah. It's chinuch. It's two separate things. Do you understand? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. It's a good question. Okay. So at the moment, we've said this price has come only to tell us that the children were sitting in a kosher sukkah. She was sitting in a private cubicle too small to be a kosher sukkah. The rabbis didn't say anything, not because they were giving a hechsher to a sukkah which is over 20 amos, but because they didn't need to say anything because she's a woman and therefore she's possible from a sukkah. So at the moment, Rabbi Yehuda does not have a support for his opinion. Carries on the Bryce and says, a couple more lines, we'll stop here. Rabbi Yehuda's Sava, Banea, Gava, Haivu, Yasve. No, Rabbi Yehuda says, no, they were sitting, her sons were sitting together with her. Lo amru la dava. And nevertheless, they didn't say anything. What does that show? No, Rabbi Yehuda would say that Daf Kosher is kosher. The sons have to sit in a kosher sukkah. They were sitting with her, although she has no obligation to sit in the kosher sukkah. She was with them. They need to be in the kosher sukkah. The rabbi saw where their sons were sitting. They didn't say anything, which proves that a sukkah higher than 20 amos is kosher, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, that's his proof.
They were sitting in a booth. Was the booth were in a booth? So that is not a part of the kosher. That goes back to what we were saying before. They were sitting in an area which is not kosher. What they should have said to her is, the sukkah itself is kosher, but however, you're supposed to be teaching your kid hinuch, and you'll put them into a room which is not a kosher part of the sukkah.
So Rashi deals with that question. Rashi, if you look at Rashi, it's 3 lines down in the narrow lines of Rashi. Rabbi Yehuda Sava, Vim Tomar Rav Chanan, sorry. If you ask, according to Rav Chanan, a final thing, which is Rav Chanan, who said that the sukkah has to be at least big enough for your head, majority of your body, and your table lying down. To moki to pulukta b'she'enu mechazekes ela kadei rosha v'ruba v'shulchanoi. Hacha kiven de banea gava havela gedola. Since her sons were with her, it must have been that this cubicle she was in was big enough to accommodate all of them, their heads, their majority of their bodies, and their tables. And therefore, the cubicle itself was a kosher sukkah, and it was 20 amos high. Rabbis didn't say anything. Therefore, Rabbi Yehuda say it must mean they were happy with the sukkah higher than 20 amos. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda say that's why I machshir it.
This is all based on one person thinking she was sitting in a separate cubicle with their kids, and someone was saying no, she wasn't. So where's you've got 2 opinions about whether her sons were with her.
Yeah.
And is that just opinion? In my opinion, she would have been.
Yeah.
And therefore.
It would appear that. So let's look at the Loshen. Rabban Savri. Yeah, it's a machlokas based on the difference between the Rabbanon in the Mishnah, Tanakama, the first opinion in the Mishnah, and Rabbi Yehuda. The rabbis were of the opinion she sat in her own private cubicle, her son sat in another part of the sukkah. And since the rabbis didn't say anything, they didn't say anything because although she was an apostle sukkah, they weren't bothered because she doesn't need to. Doesn't prove that it can be 20 amos high. In fact, it proves that it can't be 20 amos high. Rabbi Huda was of the opinion that yes, she was in a private cubicle, but together with her sons, and a cubicle bigger. It was like the royal enclosure, so to speak. They still have those today, like the little royal enclosure. But because the balcony on Buckingham Palace, it's big enough to accommodate not only the Queen but the royal family, right?
So one side is saying it could have been she was sitting without her sons,
mm-hmm.
and therefore there's no.
They were of the opinion that she was. Yeah, according to the rabbis, they were of the opinion that she sat on her own. The Queen sat on her own.
Somebody else said, she sat with her kids.
Yeah, Rabbi Huda said no, she sat with her children, and the fact that she sat with her children would mean that the sukkah she was sitting in had to be large enough to be kosher on its own right, and it was 20 amos high. The rabbis didn't say anything, therefore they must approve of a sukkah 20 amos high. Okay, we'll leave it there. The Gemara then goes on and goes back to the question of the inner dimensions of the sukkah, whether there need to be 7 tefachim square, meaning head, majority of the body, and table, or daled amos. We'll see the machlokas there next time. We're going to take a break now for the summer, post Tisha B'Av for a couple of weeks. I'll obviously put on the group when we're back.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Keep well.